So, hey friends, this is me, Vishwas Narayan. I'm a community evangelist at Devtron. So, I've been working on a lot of other technology as one of the subjects. So, MLOps happens to be one of my most favorite topics to research upon and work upon every single day. I love, breathe, eat MLOps. Like, that's the amount of passion that I have for the subject. And here I am doing a podcast with my dear community mates who are really enthusiastic to learn, teach, and evolve with MLOps practices. And I think that's a short intro that I have right now. And let's start the podcast now.
Perfect. So, hello, Vishwas. Before starting to this podcast, I just wanted to give our student or the listeners a gist about the MLOps. Like, can you please explain what MLOps is about, why it has been introduced, what was the need, and because in tech industry everything comes up when there is a need. So, why do you think MLOps has been introduced in the ecosystem?
So, okay, ML ops is nothing but ML and the operations coming as a definition right now. So, so the challenge is always about like, can we reduce the mundane job that is always repetitive and can we automate it? Because to me, most of my mentors that I have and I look back at, they always think like, can you become a leader who can really fascinate the team by reducing the work that they do as a continuous mundane role, and now can you make sure that they put their efforts into something which is more effective and efficient over the course of time? So that's the definition that we are going to add anytime when we come as an engineer, right? So so MLOps is always an ecosystem problem statement. It's never an technology problem statement. So there are hundreds of different technologies, but MLOps is all about, there is always an ML as one of the engineering practices. Can you as a leader use any of the tool and automate it, and then make sure that everything will runs as smooth as butter, right? That's what every technologist dream about. Like, today I'm in MLOps, let's put some more chaos into the engineering practices. So now it becomes chaos engineering practices or a chaos operation practices. So it's always that humble attempt that engineers had in order to reduce the mundane job. So training, testing, validation, deployment is always an continuous process. So MLOps is a strategy, like it's a one time fit all. Like, one time you strategize, deploy it as a pipeline, now it has to be in such a way that it is applicable everywhere. So even the challenge is always about version of the tool. So TensorFlow, as you know, TensorFlow doesn't stay stable. Like, the TensorFlow 1.0 version is not the same as TensorFlow 2.0 version. And when I was learning 2.0, every documentation had a different shift, and it's never the same. So it's always the practices which we wanted to automate, and MLOps is an ML process automation. That's it, simple as that. So it's always an ecosystem problem statement that we understood and we now tried automating it.
Yeah, so can you explain how? So we have this first ML infrastructure. Now, can you? I just wanted you to throw some light on how does this Azure ML infrastructure differs from the MLOps solution that are available in the market?
So what makes me think different when I think about the offerings of ML and the offerings of an ML infrastructure inside Azure is, so I think Azure is basically an ML driven ecosystem, right? Anything about your web apps, even today, has its own set of graphs that you can look back at. Anything as an container instances, they come with their own graphs that you need. Like, you don't need an entire monitoring team or an observability team. Somebody who has an access to an Azure account can really do that kind of a work. But the challenge is always about, when an ML problem statement comes up, can people go not crazy about the technology that is changing? Because if you see any other places where they say we are ML ops first platform, probably there is only one problem statement which is made ease. But Azure looks back at the problem statement of the ecosystem, right? Once I talk ML ops, like, your simple auto ML pipeline is so much fascinating that you don't want to move away from it. Like, most of the times why I go behind the AutoML thing is, it's because it's much more easier for me to explain to somebody who doesn't know anything ML. So even if you look at the way they have improvised in their infrastructure, so let me just say you one thing. So there is N series VM which we use, right? N series VM, I used to use it when when we were training heavy models. But today, today there is always a challenge, right? Tesla architecture doesn't work as good as what it used to work for Ampere today. That is the GPU problem statement. So now, even if you consider GPU problem statement, it's too hectic. I can't change from one GPU to other, but today I can change from one GPU to other because there is a VM which is attached in a cloud. That means your VM is a part of a data center. So you have the flexibility now. So even if you see the pattern here, I'm doing very less job of decision making. I'm doing more work on the ML operations rather than just going out there and figuring out, should I invest here, should I invest there. So I think ML infrastructure in Azure is very, very uh, fascinating in terms of the accessibility which they deliver to any developer or any ML developer who we have in the market, and the way they even have driven that software stack inside that ML infrastructure is much more easier to understand when a new developer enters the infrastructure, when the new developer enters the problem statement of the production, rather than thinking, okay, this is what we wanted to do, and everything just went changing in our production every single day.
Yeah. So now, as you have talked about Azure ML, and there are these libraries you have also mentioned TensorFlow. So I just want you to describe, or maybe just quickly give a gist about how do these Azure ML integrate with popular ML libraries and frameworks like TensorFlow and PyTorch.
I think it's never a thumb rule to have TensorFlow and PyTorch as your regular training frameworks that you would need, right? Sometimes transformers work absolutely fine on any infrastructure, but
Yeah.
actually moving with a lot of ease is something that we are missing, right? Like, think about it. Think about if there was no paper from 2012, which was Alex Net paper, which really changed the way we thought about training something on ML.
Okay.
So it was something on, can we use the gaming console for training our models? That means, can we use GPUs to train our models? So now, if you see that, so even TensorFlow has GPU version of it and CPU version of it. It's never one flavor of it, right?
Okay.
So if you think about the way you have to integrate with all these things, it really bugs me out. Like, should I go with it as one version, or else should I keep updating my technology stack every time there is a new release? So what happens with an infrastructure like Azure is, the moment you have it as an enterprise edition or anything like that, you are for sure to have one version of it. Your program manager works with you, the principal architects work with you from Azure, so they will start guiding you. Okay, this is what you need to update, this is what you need to upgrade, because that infrastructure belongs to Azure rather than you, right? So they will be there with you. So if you ask me about the way which the frameworks are getting integrated, it still works the same way as it works in other cloud platforms. There's nothing bad about it, but the plus point about it is you need not have to change your technology stack. That means
Okay.
your developers know PyTorch, let them work on the PyTorch. Which version of PyTorch you want, you decide, and you just come up with one technology stack, and it's there for you. So in a similar way, if you think about automating the MLOps pipeline, is much more easier here. So the moment you navigate to an ML workflow onto an Azure, you have something called as pipelines, endpoints, data store, and everything. So all
Okay.
these are automated, and all these are enabled through an open source software like MLflow, Onyx, and endpoints are, of course, they might be GraphQL, or else they might be REST APIs, but at the end of the day, they're coming out as an API at the end of the day. So even if you look at how the pipelines are getting built, it's still ML flow. Even if you think about Azure Databricks, the moment you push an ML workload, it's still auto ML workflow, or anything which you do on Databricks, it's still ML flow coming into the picture. So the entire integration of Azure is on open source. So the moment you want to push your Jupyter notebook, and you want to build a model, deploy a model onto it, it's still ML flow pipelines which are running on to the model registry and everything. So these are the best practices. Like, the moment you know an open source ecosystem, it's very easy to understand and work around an ML infrastructure today.
Yeah, so now as when we talk about these integration, we have covered the integration part, like why and how these libraries can be integrated. You have covered so many things and shared these insights. I wanted to know where it comes. Like, what are some challenges of managing those machine learning models in production environment, and how does these Azure ML help address those challenges? And being you as ML practitioner, how did you find MLOps as a good practice?
Like it's a everybody's production problem statement every single day, right? You don't hire a developer, or else you don't hire a ML engineer because he knows only one framework, because
Okay.
they should know how to rig up an architecture at least. So that is what you always think about. So let me just give you a simple example. So today a developer doesn't know how to code ML models, can use Azure Cognitive Services, and he can just go back and listen to the documentation, or else you can just view the documentation today. So listening is also there, you can also view the documentation today, and you can just go put the tokens out there. See, of course he has to put that as a secret or a environment variables, and you can just go back and deliver that AI solution with zero code written for ML. That means only he has to write the deployment code, and the zero code ML is already there. So that is how an ecosystem of ML is already being addressed from cognitive services. Like even if you take Vivek Sridhar as one of the example, Vivek Sridhar is now the developer advocate for AI and ML, because he didn't actually know what was AI ML before 2017 or so, but today he knows how to tackle an ML problem statement in something as good as and cognitive services, because his previous startup, which he did before joining DigitalOcean and after joining Microsoft, it was built on Bing cognitive services. That means he didn't have a knowledge of ML, but he did apply some of the ML components. That means though he was building something which was huge, he didn't have to worry about the ML model building process right now. So that's how Microsoft has already addressed the fact that there is already a zero code ML for you, just go and rig it up. But the moment an ML engineer wants to develop something new, the problem is always about, should I consider this infrastructure? Should I consider the cost here? Should I consider the FinOps model? That means financial operations model. That is what we say today. It's a new jargon in the market. So that all these things comes into the picture. But what makes Azure much more easier is because they already have a well architected framework built on the ML workspace. So right now don't have to worry about, like, hey, you know what, we are doing this, we are doing that. Should we think about where is this FinOps model going? Where is this going? Where is that going? You don't have to do that. Just go out there, start rigging your model, and your boss is ready to pay for it, because it's much more novel in terms of any approach. So this is what I was talking about. So more you want to think about money, less your efficiencies. So what Azure has done is it has given that kind of a pricing in such a way that you get to understand, okay, if we train model for 24 hours, this is how much we are going to get as a bill, and this is the only headache that we need to follow through in terms of the financial operations. So I think the moment anybody thinks about, should I build a model on PyTorch, TensorFlow, or should I convert the model from TensorFlow models to Onyx, because that's also there. Because Onyx is actually supported by an Microsoft subsidiary, or else the Microsoft is the one of the organization which is supporting that project. That means there is always a chance for Microsoft to optimize it even further in the machine learning workflows that they have. So what they do is, it's very simple. They have multiple integration with respect to different problem statements. So the moment your developer is ready to push any code, which is TensorFlow, PyTorch, or Keras, or anything, so it's just one integration away to convert your model into the model registry, and just get Onyx models up and running with just a simple set of code, and you are ready to go anywhere. So this is how, even if you think all these models, all these kind of accessibility over point of view that we are talking right now with respect to ML, is just being addressed by Azure ML infrastructure. So there is no dependency on any frameworks, there is no dependency on anything. It's just making it more developer friendly, rather than just saying, okay, this is what we want to achieve with all the jargons that we are going to add in the production right now.
Okay, so as you have took the discussion a little bit more further, I just wanted, could you please explain how Azure ML integrates with these MLOps tools that you have mentioned, like Onyx that you have mentioned now, Microsoft Azure supports it all, and what are the benefits? I just want to know if you could really emphasize on the benefits part that these integration provides.
I think this goes back to the previous answer that I gave, right? Your cognitive services are Onyx model right now. That means You can still try to deploy your Onyx model on a Raspberry Pi. You can still deploy it using your laptop as well. You can also deploy
Mhm.
it on any of the, what do you call, the data stream that is coming up from your CCTV camera as well, right? So there are different services in GCP as well where I appreciate them a lot. And there are some services like video stream analytics and everything. So all these infrastructure is on Onyx platform itself. That means
Okay.
Open Neural Network Exchange platform. So this is an kind of a framework which actually unifies the model building process. That means, let's say your developer is ready with TensorFlow code and he is ready to build a model which is TensorFlow ready. He is absolutely ready to build a model with you by using TensorFlow. Like that is how it is. And let's say he wants to deploy it on an edge compute, which is impossible when it's an gigabit kind of a model. It's very difficult to optimize such kind of a model. So what it does is, so it basically brings out one form factor to your entire model building process, and it just throws out the model for you. So the moment you have a model built, you can deploy it anywhere right now. So that is how it is. So open neural network exchange is going to be that one definition which is going to make it device agnostic as well as software agnostic. Like it works similar way on your any network stack or else your Linux stack or else any hardware stack that you have today. It still works the same way. But if you ask about a further more of an integration, so Azure ML infrastructure is known because it gives that accessibility with respect to less amount of software to be written. So there are some instances where they have used logic apps as one of their production use cases. I'm like, how can they use logic apps for one of the production use cases? Like, you just go out there and see the Azure customer stories. Customer stories have a lot of use cases from Databricks, a lot of use cases from uh, logic services and things like that. I'm like, what is happening with this? Because they were able to unify all these processes, they were able to get it. If they had not unified it, probably they would have had stuck with only one problem statement right now. So I think sorry for that. Sorry for that. Edit hota hai na?
Yeah, sure.
So because they were able to get an unification in all these processes, they were able to think about a business application. So in a similar fashion, Azure is always about less plumbing and more amount of business logic delivered. So what happens with integration with all these services is it brings out much more ease in delivering software. It brings out much more ease in rollback strategies. Like you need not have to think again. Like if the model is 99.9% accuracy now and now it's facing a downtime, it's okay to get back to a 98.5% accuracy model, because it's far better than losing more customers than gaining more customers, right? It's better to gain more customers with 98.5% model than losing more customer because we are hungry to deliver only 99.99% accuracy model. So all these integration that I'm talking, ML Flow, Onyx, TensorFlow, PyTorch, or anything as good as CNTK was one of the frameworks which I use. Cognitive Toolkit was once upon a time it was a very huge framework, but I think Kefi was one of those. Kefi is also gone. Like Kefi, that nobody uses Kefi today. So the moment we think about any sort of an criteria to build a model and drive business logic faster, we need to make sure that our developers and MLOps as well as DevOps engineer think less about infrastructure. So I think ML infrastructure in Azure has an capability of software stack that is already embedded within them. So that means you have to think less about your infrastructure. You have to think less about your software stack that is being used right now, and you can think more about delivering business values out of all the solution that is offered from Azure services. So all these frameworks that are being integrated, it's strategically and logically built just for delivering the business use cases.
Okay, and now, so as you have mentioned about so many use cases, and we have focused about the toolkits and multiple things. Now, I just wanted to know your views. What are the some most interesting use cases that you have seen for Azure ML, and whatnot, like the benefits that organization got from using these MLOps services like the Onyx and PyTorch, TensorFlow, and all these things.
One of my research paper was on actually it was a final year project that I did, and we were supposed to rig up a new architecture. We were supposed to write our own pipe framework and things like that. So I think because I use more of an Azure services, I was able to think what I should do without and TensorFlow framework, and how I should start building using the same technology that I rigged up right now, right? Let's say I have a neural network architecture and I need to version it. I need to have a control over the software flow which I'm trying to build. It's very difficult when it comes to even getting something as good as and big set of data, training it again over and over again. Like it's a pain over a course of time. So I think the functionality of Azure was always about making sure that you think less on operations part. Like, oh my god, already I have an 100 gigs of data, what should I do? Just put it on a storage account and you are good to go. You can just just call it out from the storage account and you are happy to go there. Like, I just love the ease of integration that we can bring on the table. Like, Logic Apps has an integration with S3 and Redshift. Like, who gives you that kind of an integration with another cloud vendor? Like,
Yes.
even if you think about Azure Arc is multi-cloud enabled. Like, even if you have a Kubernetes cluster on premises, you can still go back and look back at what's happening inside your entire ML infrastructure. So I think over a course of time, even if you think about what problem statement that we had with respect to building our own model, building our own software stack where we wanted to containerize the application, deploy that application, I think Azure has made a huge impact in anybody's life, not just a student, not just a professional. So even in my use case, I was able to train as much as model I can. I was able to automate the process of training and deployment. Testing was always an uh, last priority for me. I didn't even test any of the models, like what do you call the unit testing or anything, because it was a final year project and we were like, okay, fine, let it just be happy with whatever we are doing. If it's working, do not touch it, right? That's what we had in our
Exactly.
whole journey. So over a course of time, I think Azure ML, as a student, it was able to help me a lot. And even in my professional life, I have seen where I have dealt with ML developers who are only PyTorch efficient, and I was supposed to convert all the models into PyTorch, TensorFlow, because the previous developers were TensorFlow efficient, now they are PyTorch efficient, and we were like, only one guy knows TensorFlow, he's writing a very critical application, and we were supposed to put it. And I think Onyx was one blessing that we had, because everybody had a different story to say, but it was just my job to drive the business. So what we did was simple. We put a GitHub actions in such a way that the moment the models get pushed, there's one more script which runs behind, which is a .py file. I think we had named it convert onyx.py, and it just ran because we were on a team subscription, $25. I think the pricing, the way the services are being built, I think it's the best combination that you can get from Azure ML, as well as any DevOps tool that is associated with Azure. I think best
Yes.
part about it, we are just driving crazy because Azure has so much of services and we can use anything and everything.
Yeah, definitely Azure ML, and specifically when we talk, Azure definitely plays a major role, and it's so according to me, it's one of the simplest cloud that I have worked with, and it provides so many things in our plate that would be really useful. And at last, at the end of this podcast, I just have one last question for you. So, what are some of the latest, advancement in Azure ML infrastructure and ML ops, and what can we expect in near future?
I think what really changed my perspective was because Oracle and Microsoft association was something which shook me apart from whatever was being told, right? I never knew that Oracle and Microsoft Azure can come together and build such an huge clouds offering over a course of time. I think
Okay.
what that partnership was basically a strategic partnership with respect to cloud and other kind of an optimization that they wanted to deliver over a course of time. Like Oracle DB is always used from most of the banking application. So I think what Microsoft vision is always about delivering solutions faster and quicker rather than just waiting for next market opportunity. Even if you consider that as one of the examples where it was just a microservices and a regular Kubernetes or a database application that is getting delivered, But now if you consider what OpenAI is, OpenAI is being talked from last conferences that we had, right? Probably it's been talked from 1.5 years, and today when we see OpenAI offerings in Azure, it's much more efficient than what we had. And
Yes.
even if you think about GitHub ka Copilot, GitHub was a very strategic investment from Azure, right? From the
Yes.
Microsoft team. It was bought for a $24 billion. Now the way they have built that rapport around with the developers, now the way they have built the rapport around the community, probably there are some problem statement which Microsoft can't address over a course of time, because Microsoft is one big organization which is on a machine to deliver as much as accessibility to the developers. But I think probably what Microsoft journey is all towards is empowering more developers in order to deliver the solution in the places that they can't achieve over a course of time. Like, you consider it health science. Health science can't be worked every single day by Azure, because they're not just a health science company. They're a cloud service offering. They're ML
Exactly.
company. They're self-driving car is one of them. Self-driving car is actually never being addressed by Microsoft. So now they're partnered with Volkswagen. So
Yes.
so the moment you think about all the offerings, the partnership which they are going through, it's basically empowering developers in the space where they can't reach out to and they can't help. So I think Microsoft is doing a very strategic partnership with respect to business, with respect to technology, with respect to developer experience. Of course, they are very good in that, and of course, their strategic investment which they do. I think the pattern which they are doing is more towards enabling developers, creating that ecosystem of developer ready infrastructure. I think even ML is also going to be something like that. So ML offerings are going to solve much more bigger problems, much more humongous problems than what we have today. So I think ML offerings are pretty good, and they are moving to in the right direction.
Yeah, so thank you for those incredible insights. And the last point that you mentioned, the partnerships thing, the strategic partnerships that Microsoft is doing right now, that are definitely will create a huge impact in future. It is doing right now, if you will see. But yeah, definitely, it's a very great aspect that they are covering in terms of future revenues. And all I can say is thank you for those insights, because it was really nice talking to you about MLOps and all these Azure ML specifically. So thank you for joining for us for this podcast, and looking for more collaboration in future. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, folks.
Thank you.